There's a bell tower deep in Bellmare Hollow. No church, no cemetery, just a rusted iron bell strung between two blackened posts. And though the bell is old and cracked, the rope frayed and stiff, locals swear they still hear it ring. Once, and only once, every year. Always on the night someone disappears. Ellie Foster had never heard the bell. She'd grown up in Bellmare Hollow and was used to its myths: the lantern ghost, the dead woods, the missing hour in the forest. All tales passed down like recipes. She never believed any of them. Until her younger sister, Mara, vanished. It happened in the late summer of 2003. Mara was 15, spirited and strange, always sneaking out after dark with a flashlight and her sketchbook. One night, she didn't come back. They found her backpack at the tree line. Her drawings were inside, pages filled with the same figure over and over, a woman in a long dress, no face, holding a lantern made of bones. The search lasted 2 weeks. Volunteers swept the woods, police combed through the caves, dogs were brought in, but no scent, no trail, no answers. And then, 2 weeks to the day after Mara vanished, the bell rang. Once, at 1:13 a.m., though no one touched it, though no one had touched it for years. Some said it was just wind. Others said it was Mara, trying to come home. But Ellie never accepted either. She moved away 6 months later and never spoke about the hollow again. Until now. 20 years later, Ellie receives a letter. No return address, no signature, just a single sentence, typed in red ink: "She's still here, and the bell is going to ring again." And below it, taped to the bottom of the page, a drawing. One Ellie recognizes: Mara's style, Mara's hand, a new image, the bell tower, and a small figure standing beneath it with Ellie's face. Ellie returned to Bellmare Hollow for the first time in 2 decades. The town hadn't changed much, same shuttered windows, same crooked roads. But the people? They stared at her like she'd never really left, like they'd been waiting for her to return. Some of them didn't speak. Others muttered behind her back. The sister? It's always the sisters. She stayed at her childhood home, which now belonged to her late uncle. The air inside still smelled faintly of tobacco and pine wood, but everything else was coated in silence, the kind that gathers in places with no answers. That night, she found Mara's old sketchbook in the attic. It was water damaged, warped but still intact. The last page was blank, until Ellie held it under the lamp. Under the light, faint pencil marks emerged, a hidden image, a tall man, faceless, standing in the trees. His hands were empty, no lantern. The next day, Ellie visited Sheriff Dunley, retired now, half-blind, living out his final years above the general store. He remembered Mara. "That girl saw too much," he whispered. "The forest don't like that." "You mean the bell?" He shook his head slowly. "I mean the man, the one who walks without a light. He comes when the bell's about to ring. One year I followed him, just once, thought he was a drifter, maybe a loony. He walked for 3 hours, never looked back, never stumbled, and when he stopped, I swear to you, the moon went out." That night, Ellie returned to the bell tower. It stood at the edge of the hollow, crooked and corroded. The bell above looked more like a tumor of rust than an instrument. But someone had recently disturbed the ground around it. Fresh boot prints. She followed them. They led into the woods. Around midnight, she saw movement between the trees. A figure, tall, slow, unlit, gliding silently along the ridge path. She hid behind a rock and watched as it passed. No lantern, no flashlight, but somehow it knew exactly where to step. No stumble, no hesitation. As it disappeared over the hill, Ellie whispered to herself, "That's not a man." And just then, as if in reply, the bell rang once, from the forest. The bell didn't echo. It rang once, low and dull, like a warning pulled from deep underground. Ellie waited. Nothing followed. No footsteps, no voice. Just the stillness after something ancient had stirred. She returned to her car and drove straight to the town records office. The clerk barely looked up. Closed. It's 2 in the afternoon. Still closed. Ellie slid a $20 bill across the desk. "I need to see records of missing persons in Bellmare from 1950 to 2003, especially around August." The clerk hesitated, then pulled out a yellowed binder from under the desk. "You didn't get it from me." Inside were dozens of files, brittle with age. Ellie flipped through them. Names, dates, causes. Unknown, wandering, ran away, accident. But one thing kept repeating. Disappeared within a week of the bell ringing. Drawings found, make, sketches of a woman with a lantern. One file stood out. 1972. a girl named Helen Marwick, aged 14. Her mother reported she'd gone into the woods to find the dark lady with the whisper light. Ellie scanned the police notes, found scrap of paper under her pillow. She died in the dark, and now she walks where the light won't go. She dug deeper and found a sealed report, blacked out in most parts. But one sentence was still legible. Subject appeared to know the bell would ring, referred to a figure named Lantern Keeper, and claimed her sister had been taken as a replacement. Sister. Ellie's pulse quickened. Helen Marwick had a sister too, Beatrice Marwick, and she hadn't disappeared. She'd changed her name to Beatrice Foster, her mother. Ellie sat back in shock. Her own mother had known. She'd never said a word. Not when Mara vanished. Not when Ellie left. Not when the nightmares came. And now Ellie understood why her mother never let them near the bell. Why she burned Mara's first drawings. Why she cried every August 12th. Because she'd heard the bell before. Because she knew what it meant. That night, Ellie searched her mother's locked trunk. At the very bottom, wrapped in wax cloth, was a lantern. Bone-handled. Cold to the touch. And on the inside of the glass, etched in something that looked like ash. She died in the dark. Behind her, the hallway light flickered once. Then went out, and in the blackness, something whispered, "So will you." Ellie didn't sleep. She sat in the dark for hours, staring at the bone-handled lantern on her desk. It hadn't lit, not with a match, not with a lighter. It was as cold and dead as the bell above the hollow, until 3:13 a.m., when the lantern lit itself. No flame, just a pale glow from within the glass, like fireflies trapped in bone. And when it did, Ellie heard a voice that wasn't her own whisper from the shadows. "Light it, and it will lead you to her. But not all of you will come back." By dawn, she was already on the trail. Lantern in hand, backpack full of batteries, rope, compass, water. None of which would matter, because the forest doesn't care about maps. The deeper she walked, the dimmer the lantern became. Even at full brightness, it barely lit her boots. The trees closed in. The birds stopped. The wind itself seemed to move around her, rather than through her. Every now and then, she heard rustling in the brush, but when she looked, nothing moved. After an hour, she realized something horrifying. She hadn't seen her own shadow since entering. Even with the lantern in front of her. Even in full daylight. She left marks on the ground, but cast no form. Eventually, she found a clearing, or rather, was led to it. In the center stood a tree stump, blackened by fire. Carved deep into the wood. They take the ones who draw them. Around the stump were dozens of pages, old, cracked, half-rotted, yet unmistakable. Mara's sketches, the faceless woman, the lantern made of ribs, and a new one Ellie had never seen. 2 girls, holding hands. One is smiling. The other is being dragged away. As she stared at the image, the forest changed. The trees seemed to breathe. From behind her, a low sound rolled across the soil. Not wind, not voice, but motion. She turned. The man with no lantern stood at the edge of the clearing. Only now, he had one. It looked exactly like hers, bone, glass, ash, but is flickered with something red inside, like fire or blood. He lifted the lantern slightly, not as a greeting, as a challenge, and then he stepped back, into the darkness, as if daring her to follow. Ellie took a breath, and followed him into the dark. The forest closed behind her. The lantern's light dimmed with every step, until finally, it went out. Ellie walked blind for what felt like hours. No sound, no light, not even the crunch of leaves beneath her boots. Just breath, not hers, close, circling like a wind that knew her name. Then, suddenly, light, a pale glow. Ahead, floating in midair. Her lantern had reignited, but it wasn't in her hand anymore. It hung from a crooked branch above an old well choked with vines. Ellie stepped closer. In the reflection on the well's dark surface, she saw herself, but not as she was, older. Hollow-eyed, wearing Mara's hoodie. And behind her, someone else stepped into view, a girl, 15, with ink-stained fingers and a terrified face. "Mara?" Ellie breathed. The girl in the reflection turned slowly, but her mouth moved wrong, like her words weren't hers. "You shouldn't have brought the light," she said, and the surface of the water shattered outward like glass. The ground caved beneath Ellie. She plunged into blackness. When she landed, she was back in the woods. But something was off. The trees were frozen. The air didn't move, and her lantern burned brighter than ever before. Ahead, a figure stood by a tree. Not the man. A girl. Mara. Ellie ran to her, embraced her, warm, real, shaking. "I came for you." You shouldn't have, Mara whispered. We can go home. I have the lantern. That's not what it's for. Behind Mara, the faceless woman emerged from the trees, towering, silent, holding a third lantern, one that pulsed red. She raised it slowly. Mara stepped back. Only one of us can go back, she said. That's how it's always been. Ellie understood. She could take Mara's place. She could become the new light bearer, the sister who stays in the dark so the other can return. The woman waited. Time didn't move. Ellie looked at her lantern, then at Mara, then let go. The forest swallowed her, and just like that, Mara blinked, as if waking from a nightmare, and found herself standing at the edge of Bellmare Hollow, alone. Later, the townsfolk would say a miracle had happened. Mara Foster, missing for 20 years, had come home, unaged, unhurt. She said nothing about where she'd been, just one sentence to the sheriff. She kept the light on for me. Back in the hollow, if you walk far enough, you'll see a pale glow between the trees. And if you're quiet, you might hear a bell ring once and see a woman with sad eyes carrying a lantern that burns white. But do not follow her. Because what walks in her place is not done watching.